A lot of people, I think you know exactly what I'm referencing. A lot of people have said like Geno is only good because of Pete Carroll. Um,
Yes, the defensive mastermind, Pete
yep,
Carroll, has
yep.
carried Geno Smith. Alrighty, welcome everybody back to another team preview here on the Miller Football channel. If you don't know who I am by now, my name is David. I also go by Miller Football, and I am currently sitting down with fans of every NFL team to talk about their team's previous season, what they did during the offseason, and what our expectations are for their upcoming season. And I've been talking about the AFC North, and we're not done that yet. But because scheduling with fans of 32 different teams is a fucking nightmare, we're going to do some of these out of order. So if it's not apparent, I am joined today by the man, the myth, the legend, Jackson Powers, also known as jpownfl. And he is a Seattle Seahawks fan. So we're going to be talking about the Seattle Seahawks. But before we dive into that, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing wonderful. As we talked earlier before the show started, I've got my Jackson Smith-njigba jersey rocking. Obviously, got the little Seahawks decorum in the back. I'm excited to talk some ball.
Hell yeah. You know, it's just occurred to me that Jackson Smith-Njigba was like your favorite player in the class, and your name is also Jackson, spelled different.
It's true. It's
But I
true.
don't know how that hasn't clicked with me yet. That's
No,
that's a
yeah,
strange
and no
coincidence.
correlation there. Believe it or
Right.
not, he
Yeah.
that was not factored into my scouting report
Maybe
when
subconsciously, but
Yeah, very possibly, but
yeah,
I definitely can say that I like this tape, regardless of the name similarity. So
for sure, for
at least
sure.
I've got that.
But yeah, go ahead and jumping into things here. Last season, the Seattle Seahawks finished 9-8, which was probably a bit better than most of us expected. I know we were a little optimistic going into the season last year on the team preview that we did during last off season,
Hmm.
but obviously, I don't think either of us really expected this to be a playoff team.
No,
Or
no,
a
not at
team
all.
that was, doing much of anything. We definitely didn't expect the quarterback, Geno Smith, to take off like he did. But they were second in the NFC West, 5-4 at home, 4-4 on the road, 2-3 in their last five. And like I said, the big X factor last year was Geno Smith really taking off and playing like a top 10 quarterback. I know some people might not agree with that, but I think it's safe to say that he was at least in the conversation to be a top 10 quarterback. So just kind of looking back at it, how does it feel to know that you might actually have a quarterback right after the whole Russ debacle?
That was certainly not on my list of expectations once we traded him. I was certainly an advocate for drafting Desmond Ritter at some point in the 2022 NFL draft, I think it was. I mix up the years a little bit. But I really did not expect Geno to be where he was, especially considering, last year when we were talking about it, I was all in on Drew Lock, man. I was like, he's going to be our starting quarterback, and I think he's going to be a little bit of a big play guy. Like, he'll probably have some turnovers, but I thought for sure Locke was going to go out there and be a super engine to this offense. But Geno looked awesome, man. Like, offensively, I think we were sixth ish in EPA per play. And once Geno really got the keys to the offense, it looked awesome. We're running a lot of empty. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf each had their fair share of deep balls. That really didn't leave the offense as much as I thought it was going to with the departure of Russ. And there was a ton of success where I just didn't really see that coming. I knew the run game would be solid. But I really thought that the passing attack was not going to look as sexy as it did. So I'm very, very grateful for that with Geno Smith.
Yeah, Gino was a big surprise last year, obviously, like I said.
Hmm.
And it was really, really fun to watch this guy that, we had all written off, and now we all know the quote he didn't write back.
Oh yeah.
Uh, it was a thing of beauty. It really was. And that offense was wonderful to watch. It was very different than what they ran with Russ at quarterback. Obviously, a lot more plays in structure and kind of relying on Gino to read the field and make a quick read rather than kind of run around like a chicken with his head cut off and hope something develops downfield. Um, but the big question, like going into next year, and we'll get into it a little bit more here in a little bit, is kind of if he can follow that up, obviously. But again, that's something we'll get into later when we're talking about expectations and whatnot. But with quarterbacks, I do want to ask, like a year removed from the Russ trade, or a little bit over a year removed, I'm sure you got to be feeling pretty good right now about it, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They're like I literally don't think I could feel better about that right now. Especially given when Seattle and Denver was negotiating the trade, Seattle really wanted to grab Dre'mont Jones from Denver. And
Oh, really? I
Denver,
didn't know that.
yeah, I found this out somewhat recently. I was like right
Oh,
after we
shit.
signed him, I think I was like
Okay.
Seattle was really advocating for him to be a part of the deal, and Denver said that's too much. We'll give you Shelby Harris instead. Seattle was obviously content with that, and then went out and grabbed Dre'mont Jones in the very next offseason. So I feel like we're just keep adding pieces from them, um, kind of just picking apart their team. Uh, Rough time to be a Broncos fan, obviously, but I'm not complaining by any means. Yeah, I think like we've spent the capital really well, obviously landing Charles Cross, and then this year grabbing Devin Witherspoon, who we'll talk about later when we're moving into the prospective side of things with this
Hmm.
team. But yeah, I think what I've really noticed from this trade is there was a lot of problems with Russ that I wasn't really aware of until he was gone. I never really thought about the locker room side of
Hmm.
things with him because for a ton of his career, he was portrayed as this like incredible guy. You know, right before he got traded, he ended up winning the Walter Payton Man of the Year award.
Hmm.
He's a super charitable guy. He's known in the Seattle area for, I think it's every Tuesday, he goes and visits the Seattle Children's Hospital. Like he's just known as this great guy, but I didn't realize all of those discrepancies in the locker room that were going on. I can really understand how guys like Geno a lot more. The other thing with him is I didn't realize how limited he was. Obviously, he's never been known as a guy who can throw over the middle.
Hmm.
It doesn't have a ton of the field unlocked to him. But towards the end of the Russ tenure in Seattle, the vision was really poor. Where it would take him so long to find his reads. And I think you saw that in Denver this year. He was third in
Hmm.
the league in time to throw this year because he's just not very good at progressing through his reads. And if you have only like this part of the field unlocked to you, it's going to make it a lot harder. And he's been creating his own sacks for a long time. I think that the narrative of Russ has never played behind a good offensive line is terrible because while he really hasn't had a ton of talents on that front, like he holds the ball for so long, he creates his own sacks at such a high rate. And so it kind of, I think it was really easy to diffuse a lot of those problems with him gone and Geno stepping into that role. So I really could not feel any better about this.
Yeah, the Russ coming out as a locker room cancer really was a bit surprising. But then
Yeah.
again, you think about these guys and they've got an image to maintain, and Russ being so like public with his charitable actions almost kind of feels like he does it as an ego boost. Now, I don't want to accuse the guy anything, but that's just how it comes off to me. I could be wrong. I don't know him personally, but when you find out how poorly he acted in the locker room and then you look at the other things, you're kind of adding up all the pieces and it makes a lot of sense. And then you go to Geno, who's the complete opposite. No ego, doesn't talk a lot, no expectations, comes out and starts firing, gets the team behind him, they rally. Like, it could not have been a better adjustment for Seattle. Like,
Yeah.
they have been absolutely killing it as of late. And then obviously, like you said, how well they've spent the picks, and we'll talk about that because oh my god, their drafts the last 2 years have been essentially flawless. I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that. But like you mentioned, it was a really efficient offense this year. So looking at some of the numbers, specifically looking at EPA per play, they were 14th in rushing, which we'll get into a little bit when we talk about the schematics of the team. 11th in passing. And then on defense, they were 26th in run defense, which I'm sure is not surprising to literally anyone who watched the Seattle Seahawks defensive line last year. They were 20th in pass defense. And then in points allowed, they were 9th in points scored, 25th in points allowed, and 12th in point differential.
Hmm.
So the numbers weren't insane outside of the passing. Obviously, being in the top 12 is pretty impressive. Right outside the top 10 with a quarterback that nobody thought was going to be anything is definitely beating expectations. Then defensively, uh, that's more of a scheme thing, really, because they were trying to do things that maybe they didn't have the personnel for, and they were planting the seeds that they now have the personnel to do. Something we'll talk about, like I said, when we get into the schematics. So, with those numbers, is there anything specific that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think Mostly on the run defense side of things. You kind of mentioned it. I think it was less of a player issue, and more of the scheme issue. And I definitely was not insightful to see this during the season at all. But one thing I noticed is when Seattle was running, they had a couple different nickel packages. When they were running the 2-4 package, they were much, much less successful against the run. And then you go to the odd 3-3 Cub package. It was much more like the statistics on everything against the run were better in literally every single metric. And what it looked like was Seattle was just trying to stick a square peg in a round hole. And I think that I'm kind of hoping for that to change this year, given on like what they've sort of alluded to in press conferences and stuff like that. But there's a lot of people who just blame the talent. I really don't think it was that. I think it was more on the coaching side of things. There was a lot of like they weren't running the right packages and guys were not playing the roles that they probably should have been. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about this offseason because I feel like I'm still left with a bad taste in my mouth with how they've addressed that. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how that sort of takes a jump this year.
Yeah. And I mean, again, doubling down on the fact that it wasn't necessarily a personnel thing. There was a point in time last year where, because of injuries, they played a game without a nose tackle. Like they did not have, I think it was against the 49ers. There was not a single healthy nose tackle
Uh-uh.
available for that game. And going up against a team like that, that's so good against the run, that is just, you're walking into the game losing. Like
Yeah.
there's no way you can feel confident in a game like that. So I agree. I think the personnel in Seattle, and obviously I think me and you talked about it during the season. We were both a little bit off, kind of being quick to blame the guys on the field rather than the guys behind the scenes. But I agree. I think it was more of a personnel thing. But speaking of their personnel, moving over to the defense and kind of shifting to the back half of the defense, I've got written down the different types of coverages that Seattle ran last year, between the 20 specifically, because once you get into the run zone, it's a whole other thing. They're going to do a lot of different things. So between the 20s, the majority of the field, they were 31st in cover zero with 0.2%. They just weren't a team that blitzed a lot last year, and I think that'll probably change now that their cornerback room has been beefed up a little bit, and they've got guys that are really, really good in man coverage. Um, they were 30th in cover one, which was surprising considering it's the Seahawks. You'd expect them to run that a little bit more. And with Tariq Woolen being as good as he was in man coverage, you'd expect them to rely on that a little bit more. They were 24th in cover two. They were 16th in cover three, which is like, what the fuck? This is the Seahawks. That's like their bread and butter, always has been, always will be. And
Yeah.
they were dead middle of the league in cover three with 34.5% of their plays. And then they were 27th in quarters. And then where it gets really interesting, something I tweeted out yesterday was they were sixth in the league in quarter half, with 1/4 of all of their plays called being quarter half. And if you don't know what that is, just as a quick explanation, it's essentially running quarters on one side, cover two on the other. You can kind of flip flop it depending on how you want to do things. And it's ran a lot against like trips looks, but they were just kind of running it against whatever last year. And a big reason for that was Tariq Woolen, who has the versatility to really cook in both cover two and in quarters, being pressed up at the line of scrimmage on a wide receiver. So they wanted to run it a lot, and it seems like that's kind of going to be the direction they're moving. And they only had one guy that they could really rely on for that. Obviously, I know Kobe Bryant was kind of kicking in and out. They were trying to make him that other guy. So they went out and got Devon Witherspoon, who is very, very similar to Tariq Woolen and can do a lot of the same things. Makes that a perfect fit. I know you weren't the biggest Witherspoon fan going into the draft, but I'm
I
sure
was
you got
not.
to. Yeah, but you've come around, haven't you? Or at least tried
A
to
little
gaslight
bit.
yourself into it? Okay.
I'm not all in.
Hmm.
But I've found a lot of reasons for the pick to make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I've liked Witherspoon since the start, so
yeah, I think
I
most
think
people have. I think I've
yeah,
been like I haven't found too many people out there that have been more critical on Witherspoon than I
you
have.
are Devon Witherspoon's biggest hater,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
which is that's gonna create a weird little inner dialogue for me when I'm watching games this
Hmm.
year.
There are two
Um,
sides to jpownfl. One that's pushing an agenda and one that wants his team to win.
yeah. Well, either I'm right or I'm happy. So
Yeah,
that's kind of where I stand on that.
that's like every analyst's method at this point in time. So you know what? You're one step closer to the big leagues with that. So
Yeah,
far, I haven't been able to get there. I can't
yeah.
I can't bring myself to do that. But yeah, I think, like I said in the what I tweeted out yesterday, learning that they ran that much quarter half really makes the Witherspoon pick make a lot more sense. And while I don't agree with it, I can see why they would maybe favor him over Gonzalez for that reason, because I feel like Witherspoon's going to be a lot better in those types of situations. So if that's the plan, if that's what they want to run with, I think that pick makes a lot more sense. And then just to wrap it up, they were 17th in cover 5. So that sure.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
cool with that.
yeah, right. So I think last year, specifically looking at the coverages, was just them kind of trying to plant the seeds of what they want to do going forward, right? Like they couldn't quite execute to the level they needed to, which is reflected by them being 20th in coverage EPA per play. But there is definitely a vision here, and I feel like they drafted very well to uh, what's the word I'm looking for here? Work with that vision, I guess. There's a big word that I'm not thinking of. It's early for me. I never record before 8 p.m. Um, but I think they did a good job of finding guys that can fit in the scheme they're trying to run. And like I said, Witherspoon's going to be a big part of that. And then that kicks Kobe Bryant into the nickel. So the Seahawks secondary is going to be really, really scary if everything works out. It's definitely something exciting to look at. Um, but with
I'm
the
excited.
Yeah, for sure. But with the run defense, I'm not gonna lie. I guess we kind of already covered it, didn't we? The different packages they're running and kind of how that translated.
A little bit, yeah. I
Yeah.
think, yeah. But I would say one other thing on the run defense, and this is
Hmm.
sort of why I'm a little more in on the Witherspoon pick, is when you watch our cornerbacks last year, they were some of the worst in the league against the run.
Hmm.
And that wasn't really as much of a factor when you're talking about guys between the tackles, but it turned a lot of like chunk gains into huge like 60-yard touchdowns.
Hmm.
And Witherspoon, like as low as I was on him, he is the best in the draft as at run defense as a
Hmm.
cornerback.
For sure.
And I think Seattle, with how weak their linebacker core is, they're going to be running a lot less base than a lot of other teams in the league. It's going to be a lot of big nickel, dime. And I think Witherspoon will probably be an outside cornerback on the downs that they run base. But I'm assuming Mike Jackson is going to be the nickel cornerback, except he'll play outside and kick Witherspoon into the slot. And that makes it really easy for him to sort of get involved when you need him to and kind of take on contact in
Hmm.
that regard. And so I think he's going to be used a lot, I think,
Yeah,
in
and I
that
mean,
regard.
you know me, I'm a sucker for a corner that can defend the run. That's like
Absolutely.
I know it's not like required or whatever, but it's a damn nice thing to have. And obviously, like you said, you saw firsthand the effects of having corners that are not very good at that, or at least adequate at it. So adding Witherspoon, who is a straight up plus run defender, is a big deal for this defense. So I'm excited to see what this defense is going to look like next year. I think we've got the blueprint for it. We've kind of got the idea of where they're trending, and we'll talk about some of the additions they made to kind of help them along with that. But moving over to the offense, and specifically starting out with the run game, because that's what I love. You know me, I'm obsessed with the run game, and kind of looking at the different types of runs they ran last year. They were third in the league in outside zone, with 38% of their rushing attempts being to the outside. Very Shanahanian. I know
Yep.
Seahawks fans probably don't want to hear that, but very, very much Shanahan influence there. At least it seems like it. They were tied for 16th in inside zone, tied for 25th in duo, 25th in power, tied for 6th in counter, tied for 3rd in draw plays, which was interesting because typically nowadays draw is ran a lot with quarterbacks. And I don't think of Geno as someone who's like super mobile. Obviously, he can move, but he's not like Fields, Lamar, Hurts, etc. Um, And then they were dead last in the league when it comes to things like pin and pull plays, right? So what's interesting to me is another draft pick they made that I think is really going to help them out next year with kind of diversifying their run portfolio, and that's Zach Charbonnet. Because to me, he's somebody that fits really, really well with inside runs. Obviously, inside zone, power, whatever you want to run. I think he's going to help out a lot with that. And then you have Ken Walker to be more of your outside back. So again, that's another thing that I think will be interesting to monitor next year is just kind of how they end up mixing up the run, how their splits end up working out. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think one of the biggest reasons that Seattle went and grabbed Charbonnet is like you talked about earlier, Seattle ran a ton of outside zone, and the reason for that is Ken Walker, as good as he was last year, was really not that smooth between the tackles. And there
mhm.
were a lot of times where, he'd get a run designed to go up the A or B gap, and he would kind of dance around behind the line of scrimmage and then try and cut it around the end of whatever tackle he's going to. And he's talented enough to where it certainly worked sometimes. But it also caused a lot of negative plays and really, really hurt his efficiency last year. And I think they want someone a little bit more consistent in that regard. And I sort of think of this running back room as the Lions last year, where Charbonnet is going to be your Jamal Williams, and then Ken Walker is going to be a little bit more of a juiced up DeAndre Swift. I think he's going to have a ton of big plays just like he did last year, but you need someone who's a little bit more consistent down to down. And like you said, adding Charbonnet is going to, I certainly believe it's going to increase those rates in terms of inside run, like duo and inside zone. Um, and I think that like I'm not when I first saw the pick, I wasn't really a fan of grabbing another running back that high, but I think the fit and what it's going to do to your running game makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on top of that, he adds that receiving element that Ken Walker, obviously, he can hold his own, but Zach Charbonnet is like a really good pass catcher out of the backfield. So he's going to be not quite your Travis Homer replacement because he's not nearly as good of a pass blocker as Homer. But he's going to provide more of a dynamic player on third downs. And then obviously there's another running back you drafted that we'll talk about that can also do that.
Mm-hmm.
But to give people an idea of Charbonnet, if they're not familiar, he reminds me a lot of David Montgomery, which is incredibly ironic given the comparison you gave where Montgomery is becoming Detroit's new Jamal Williams. He's just an incredibly consistent and reliable back that sees the field very, very well. And like you mentioned, Ken Walker maybe doesn't do that as well. You know, his vision might not be quite up to snuff. So having a back that's really decisive between the tackles is very, very helpful. It can really add a new element of, just pounding the rock between the tackles to your offense, which obviously can't hurt. Um, and then moving over to the passing game, they were 17th in play action ran, which is good to see because Geno didn't need that as like a crutch. Obviously, when you have some of these subpar quarterbacks, a lot of teams will lean into play action to kind of help them out, throw the defense off. They didn't have to do that. Geno was a lot better than expected, but it is funny given the amount of outside zone they ran. Usually, if you run a lot of outside zone, you're going to run a lot of play action to keep the defense on its toes. They were about middle of the league in time to throw, tied for 19th. But what's really interesting is this team was sixth in air yards with 57.1% of their passing yards coming through the air. Yet they were 20th in average depth of target, meaning that just looking at the numbers, and obviously you can attest to this from watching the team, uh, they were either throwing the ball incredibly short or just airing it the fuck out. There was no in between. Geno, to my knowledge, was the most efficient deep ball passer in football last year. I think
Yep.
it was like over 50% of his deep or his attempts over 20 yards were completed. So it's a really interesting offense to look at because you still got that Russ-esque, like getting the ball downfield, but Geno was also cooking short. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that or if you think that's going to continue this year.
I think those are going to change a little bit with the addition of Jackson Smith and
Hmm.
Jigba. And I think you could it's either a bomb or it's like a dump off or like Tyler Lockett catching like a 5 yard zone settlement. Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be the guy who works a ton in that like middle part of the field. And I actually think there's a huge chance that he ends up outproducing DK and Lockett in that matter because there were looks there. We just didn't really have the personnel in that matter, right? Like Fant, with what little production he had, he was certainly someone that would get between like the 10 to 20 yard range on pretty much every single catch he had. And then DK and Lockett were pretty much working over like short over the middle, or it was like an outside the sticks go ball for them.
Hmm.
And I think Jackson Smith and Jigba coming in is really going to change that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, JSN, we could talk about it for hours, I'm sure. He adds an incredibly new dynamic layer to this offense. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to do. I think he's somebody that not a lot of people are talking about when it comes to things like rookie of the year, even because if he is able to be productive in this offense, which he absolutely can be, as you pointed out, because he's going to be a lot of the over the middle stuff, especially considering their tight end room is respectfully kind of weak. Um, we could absolutely see a world where he's up there. You get narratives to go with the award. He's the third wide receiver in this great offense, but he's producing like the top receiver. And he was I think the second. Was he the first or the second receiver off the board?
He was the first. It
It
was
was
yeah, it
by
was
a
pick
pick,
20.
right?
Yeah, because it was him at pick 20, and then the three guys went the next three picks. Like he
Yeah.
caused the
Okay.
run.
Okay. I don't know why, but in my head, I thought Baltimore picked before Seattle for a second. Either way, it took until pick 20 for a receiver to get off the board. So the narratives are there. If he can have a productive season, I think he's kind of like a dark horse rookie of the year type of guy. I'm definitely excited to see what that's going to do for Seattle's offense, obviously. But moving on from the schematics, kind of moving over to the staff, this is a team that has kind of been together for a while. You've got Pete Carroll, you've got the general manager whose name's escaping me.
John
They've
Schneider.
Yeah, John Schneider. They've been partnered up for quite a while now. And then you move lower, you've got Shane Waldron, who was the offensive coordinator last year. Big reason as to why Geno played so well. Did him a lot of favors, obviously, but it wasn't just him. I can't remember who made this comment, but there was a debate happening on Twitter about Geno Smith and a certain Miami Dolphins quarterback that I know you saw. And
Oh.
somebody, the individual arguing for Tua brought up Geno kind of being a merchant of the offense. And then another
Yeah.
Seahawks fan came in. It was like, well, if you actually look at it, once Shane Waldron's offense kind of got stale and people were starting to pick up on what he was trying to do, Geno bailed him out a lot last year. So it was a really good collaborative effort between offensive coordinator and quarterback last year. And then they're adding in Greg Olson, who's a quarterbacks coach, has 13 years of offensive coordinator experience in the NFL, which is a massive addition. And then on defense, they added a pass rushing specialist, which is awesome that that's a position in football now. With BT Jordan coming in from Michigan State. And I'm not going to lie, I'm not super familiar with his game, but I have heard nothing but praise about this guy. From what I've heard, he's one of the best, at being a pass rushing coach in the nation at any level, which is awesome. And then also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Seahawks legend Will Tuka, is it Tukuafu? I think that's how you say his name. I don't
Will
know.
Tukuafu.
Tukuafu, yeah. I
Yeah.
suck with names. I have to say this once an episode. I'm awful with names. I called Chris Olave Chris Olave for like 4 months. So you could show me the most basic name in the world and I'd find a way to fuck it up. Anyways, former defensive tackle turned fullback is on this team as a defensive quality control coach. And that warms my heart. Seattle's no stranger, obviously, to bringing in former players on the coaching staff. There's like 6 or 7 of them right now. He's just the only one I had written down because obviously fullback connection. But you got to feel pretty good about this coaching staff right now. I really like what they've got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Waldron. I At
Mm-hmm.
one point in the season, I thought for sure there was no way that we'd be able to retain him this year because I
Mm-hmm.
thought he'd have a head coaching job by now. Um, and even I still feel like this will be the last year that he's staffed under our team because he's done such a great job with the offense and what we have so far. He's really been a big part in sort of unlocking the field for Geno. Um, when Geno was when Russ got hurt and Geno was taking over, um, it was much different. You were seeing a ton of heavy personnel, operating off of a lot of play action. It looked very Arthur Smith esque.
Yeah.
And at this point in the season, you're seeing a little bit of a mix of that, as well as Geno's running a lot of empty, a lot of 3x2, and then getting out and throwing the field with only throwing down the field with only 5 blockers. I think Waldron has a lot to do with a little bit of the misdirection going on in the Seahawks offense right now. And then obviously Carroll and Schneider, um, at this point in their careers, you should not be betting against them. Yeah, I feel really solid right now with where this group is at. The only thing I'm worried about, Waldron leaving and Pete Carroll, oldest coach in the league, he's got to retire eventually, and I'm really not ready for that day yet.
Yeah. He's the
Um,
oldest coach in the league, but he might be the most energetic.
yes. Oh, he's so youthful. It's
Uh-huh.
crazy. He's got that like Jerry Seinfeld type
He
of
kind of does.
yeah.
Pete Carroll and Jerry Seinfeld really are two peas in a pod. Oh my god.
Yeah, no, there was a picture a few years ago. Seattle made I don't remember which game it was, but there was some like fourth quarter comeback that Seattle ended up pulling out. Pete Carroll like got on top of the lockers and like took his shirt off and he's partying with all the guys afterwards and that gives me a little bit of hope that we've got a couple years left in the tank.
Oh no,
But
I think barring a season that just completely drains him of life, which I'm not expecting by any means anytime
right.
soon with the direction this team's heading, I think he's still got a little bit of gas left in the tank, despite being as old as he is. That guy has more energy than I do, and despite my appearance, I'm only 20 years old, so that's saying a lot. I think Pete Carroll, definitely one of the more likable coaches in football.
Mhm.
And I love that he has another team that's kind of cooking and he gets to enjoy it and really relish in the fact that he's on top again. Because truth be told, and we'll talk about this when we get to expectations, it wouldn't shock me if this team won their division this year. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I really would not be surprised.
yeah, just because there's a certain team out in the Bay Area that doesn't know what the fuck they're doing at quarterback. That's kind of the big reason for that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
But moving into the offseason and starting out with free agency, there was a lot of turnover this year, a lot of guys leaving. So, as a fan of the team, whether it's because it's somebody that you personally were attached to for whatever reason, or just somebody you think that their impact will be missed, what free agent loss hurts you the most?
Ooh, that is a really good question. I might have to go look up a list of who we lost right now. No one's really, I guess Al Woods
Yeah.
really hurts, but he wasn't really a free agent loss as much as like a cap casualty.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I forgot about that. He got cut, didn't he?
he did, and it was to save $3 million, and then we ended up spending like that much money on Jaron Reed, who I really did not like. Free agents lost.
Yeah.
Oh, obviously Penny.
Hmm.
I mean, I think it was the right move. Like I was saying during the season, Penny needs to be either a Lion or an Eagle. And obviously now he's an Eagle. Cody Barton, with how much I really despise this linebacker core now, especially the coverage end of things.
Uh huh.
I could really use a Cody Barton on my team right now. Um, Ryan Neal, I didn't love us because he was he was on like a restricted free agent contract, and we only had to pay him like it was like 1.2 million or something like that, and then we ended up letting him go and grabbed Julian Love for 3 million a year. I didn't love the value on that, um, but yeah, I think that's kind of where I think my number one guy would probably end up being either Woods or Barton because
Yeah.
those were agendas I was pushing in the off season, and then both of them walk, and I was like, ah,
Yeah, because I mean, you're right, and we'll talk about it towards the end. But that linebacker core is rough,
Mm.
especially in the coverage aspect of things. I like some of the run defense they bring, but Cody Barton really could have been a nice player to have this year.
I understand why he left because he took less money to go to Washington because they were offering him a mic role, and
Oh,
with
okay.
with Jordan Brooks still in the building, Seattle wasn't
Hmm.
willing to do that.
Right.
So I understand it from his standpoint of things, but it would be so nice to have him in the building right now. I'd feel a lot more comfortable in our base downs.
Yeah. But looking at some of the other players that left, I'm not going to name off everybody because there's like a billion guys here. But you lost Shelby Harris, who played nearly 50% of the snaps for y'all last year, obviously came over in the Russ trade. Gabe Jackson, who played 61% of snaps last year.
Let him go. I am no, he's my Mustafa.
He's
He's
you're okay. Okay, I
he's
understand
certainly
the
not as
pain.
bad. He's certainly not as bad as Mustafa, but I can only take so many ineligible man down fields
Yeah,
to where I need to see him go.
yeah. And I mean, hey, I wasn't naming him off because he's good. He just played a lot last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another offensive lineman, Austin Blythe, who played nearly 95% of snaps last year for y'all, but y'all drafted a center and added one in free agency, so I don't think he'll be missed that much.
Mm-mm.
Puna Ford, who's one of my favorite players in the league because there's no reason that man should move or exist the way he does. He is the most oddly built individual I have ever seen, and God, I love it. I
Yeah,
forget where he ended up. Did he go to Buffalo?
he is in Buffalo right
Yeah,
now.
that's right.
Yeah,
I made a video about that because I was really excited about it for them because they
yeah,
also could not stop the run for shit.
yeah.
And
And
Puna,
he's not a good run defender really, but like the
really, I thought he
combo,
was.
he's much more of like he's got a little bit of that like Elvis Doomerville pass rush to where like he gets wins on guys because he's so weirdly
Yeah,
built. But no,
yeah, for sure.
his strength was pass rush win rate. He was always way
Well,
better at that.
yeah,
But
I mean,
he certainly wasn't a bad run defender.
okay, okay, yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah. Obviously, he's better as a pass rusher, but I was gonna
Hmm.
say I didn't think he was a bad run defender. Maybe
No,
some of that
no.
was playing alongside shit again alongside Al Woods. Maybe I was
Yep.
overrating how good he was because of that a little bit, and that happens. You know, you see two big guys going at it, you're like, surely they must be great,
Hmm.
and it's just one of them doing all the heavy lifting. I'll have to go back and look at that a little bit. But Travis Homer, obviously one of the best pass blocking backs in football now with my Chicago Bears, which I love and hate because I saw somebody the other day say that he should make the roster of Ricari Blasingame, and I was about ready to
Mm.
throw hands because that is just no, no.
Yeah.
Um,
Is Homer going to be returning kicks for you guys? Because
I
that
don't know
was part
what
of
the
his role
hell.
in Seattle.
Right now, Valus Jones has been returning kicks and
Oh,
punts, and he was
that
good
probably makes
on
a little more
kicks,
sense.
but
Yeah.
on punts he fumbled a lot. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I
He
would
had
have.
bad hands in general last year, man. He couldn't hold a
I
football to
know.
save his
He
life.
had that one catch against Buffalo.
Yeah,
That
that was
that was his
sweet.
one thing.
That was in my Fields video, I think,
It
where I
should have
did the
been. It
like
was a
T lot.
beautiful
Yeah,
throw.
because but it was less of Vila sprays and a lot more of
Oh
Fields.
well, yeah, no, it was all
Yeah.
Justin. Jones was just in the right place at the right time. It was a beautiful throw.
Yeah,
Which I hate that he isn't good, by the way, for the dumbest reason, just because I want him to be good enough to earn a nickname. Because V12 would be such a sick
that's
nickname
pretty
for a
cool.
fast receiver.
Yeah.
But no, he has to be bad at football and old as shit. Like,
If the Bears can get him like a little bit of a like a Wandale Robinson type of role where it's just
mhm.
get it to him in the flat and make plays with the ball in his hands.
Well, they lined him up in the
V12 would
backfield a couple
emerge.
times last year
Yeah,
and
yeah.
tried that,
I
and it
can see a
kind of
Debo role for
worked.
him. I think that
Yeah.
kind of makes sense.
Oh God, don't start with calling him Debo Jr. That was the thing that happened after he got drafted. There were people on
Oh,
Bears Twitter
really?
calling him Debo Light. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
it
I
was.
mean, it makes sense play style wise,
Yeah, they
but
also called the Bears receivers room last year before the season the Legion of Zoom. So,
hmm, I don't think that's fitting at all. Actually, with like,
or no, maybe it was 2 years ago, and we had Marquise Goodwin and Demir Bird. I'm sorry, I was a
okay,
year off. It
yeah.
it made a little bit of sense, but it was still
I
bad.
was gonna say like Nikhil Harry earns no role in the Legion of Zoom.
Yeah, Nikhil Harry, Equinemius St. Brown, surely
Yeah.
two
No, it's just
burners.
and Claypool, like it's just all like lumbery
Claypool
deep
wasn't there yet.
threats. Yeah, fair,
Claypool
fair.
wasn't there yet, but yeah, who knows? Maybe now that the Bears have an actual receiver core, Bayless Jones can settle into a role rather than trying to be made out to be the third option.
Right.
Because there was a point last year where he was the third receiving option when Mooney got hurt and Claypool got hurt, and it was Komet, Jones, and Dante Pettis. But anyways,
Not
enough
good.
about my suffering. Looking back at the Seahawks, some of the other notable names: a former Bear, Artie Burns, is no longer with the team. Another former Bear, Marquise Goodwin, is no longer with the
we
team.
actually we actually just signed Artie Burns again.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Oh,
like
okay.
it's like nothing guaranteed, but I bet he makes the team.
No, I think he will too. Yeah, he hasn't panned out, but I mean, he's still serviceable as like a fifth or
Yeah.
sixth guy on the depth chart.
I think that's exactly. I bet Seattle takes 6 DBs this year, and I bet he's number 6.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, no, that's
Hmm.
valid. I didn't know he got re-signed.
Yeah.
Um, let's see here. What else we got? Another former Bear and Jalen Tabor, also known as Tease Tabor.
Oh yeah,
Um, and then a fullback, breaks my heart, Cullen Gillespie, no longer with the team. He's not going to get signed anywhere, I can't imagine.
man.
But y'all got Nick Bellore. It's okay. Um,
Yeah, he really has not been getting fullback
I
reps
know.
for a minute now.
I know. He's still a fullback in my heart, though.
He's a special teamer in the eyes
He
of
is.
Pete.
Well, hey,
But
he's one of the best special teamers in football, so I
absolutely,
can't
yeah,
blame him.
he's been our captain
Yeah.
over Jason Myers, who had pretty much a perfect year last year.
Hmm.
Says something.
Yeah. But that's a good transition into talking about some of the guys you brought back, including Nick Bellore, who got, I believe, a multi-year deal
Yeah,
to
I think it
stick
was
around
3
as a special
years.
teamer. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, which, by the way, Pete Carroll, if you're watching this, let the man play fullback. That's what he's meant to do. It is what he was put on this planet to do. I know he's really good at special teams, but just imagine a guy like that blocking for Kenneth Walker.
Yeah.
I mean,
The Miller football fullback agenda needs to live on
it.
in
I mean, hey,
the
it's
Emerald
thriving
City.
almost everywhere else at this point.
Yeah,
The
that's true.
league is starting to come around thanks to Sean McVay deciding that
Hmm.
wide receivers can be fullbacks.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh well, actually, I forgot to mention. I think Seattle's doing that a little bit this year.
with who?
Derek Young. They started doing it at
Ooh,
the end of the
okay,
season last year. Yeah, I bet
interesting.
he's our Skoranek.
Okay, interesting. I'll have
Yeah,
to look into that. I didn't pick up on that.
yeah. It was like the last like 3-ish games or something like that
Okay,
is when he really started to get that role. But yeah, Derek Young.
interesting. Like straight up lining up in the backfield, or just like
Oh
kicking
yeah,
in.
like we'll
Okay.
go like I formation. He's the
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Uh-huh.
Interesting. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm having to get a little more liberal with what I call a fullback nowadays, but it's
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
fair enough.
Anything for the agenda, like Ben Skoranek.
Absolutely.
Fuck it, he's one of them. I was gonna say one of us. I wasn't a fullback. He's one of them.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Derek Young will welcome him with open arms if that's the case.
Yeah.
Um,
I bet he gets that role increased this year.
Fuck it, why not? Like I said, it never hurts to have a lead blocker for your halfback.
Never does.
Never, never. Especially if you're gonna run that much outside zone. Hell, even if you're
Yeah.
gonna run inside zone.
Hmm.
That's Josh Jacobs, leading rusher last year. What was the difference between the year before that and last year? They added Jakob Johnson. Coincidence? I think not. But anyways, some of the other resignings, obviously Geno was the big one. He's on a really like team friendly deal where I think it's after a year, right? You can kind of cut him if things don't pan out and you're not going to feel it too much. Like obviously there's going to be a little bit of a penalty, but nothing crazy.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
the two really nice things about that, it's really front loaded, which
mhm,
was a lot of the reason why Seattle was connected to Anthony Richardson in the pre-draft process this
mhm,
year, and I wholeheartedly believe that if he was not the pick at 4, like 5 was his floor. I really do believe Pete Carroll would have spent that pick on Richardson instead
mhm,
of Witherspoon. And the other nice thing about it is so much of the deal is incentive based,
mhm,
where when it was reported, it was 3 years, 105. And then when the details came out, it's basically 3 years, 75
mhm.
plus like the extra 30 million of that is all incentive,
Huh.
which I love.
Yeah. Give Gino more of a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah,
Not a
yeah.
bad idea at all.
Hmm.
And then some of the other names here: Phil Haynes, Miles Adams, Michael Jackson Sr., John Radigan, Jason Myers, Drew Locks coming back as the
Oh
backup,
yeah, oh yeah.
and then Cody Thompson were the names I could find that were sticking around in Seattle.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then moving into who you added in free agency. I'm sure I already know the answer to this, but out of everyone you added in free agency, who are you the most excited to watch next year?
The biggest one is certainly Dre'Mont Jones. He offers a ton as a pass rusher from like the 5 technique. He's really not beefing up our line that much.
Mm-hmm.
He plays a lot of big end. I bet there's a lot of times where when we're running like our bear front or our nickel version of the bear front, he's going to be the 4-eye guy and then do almost kind of like the Miles Murphy, except it's designed where like we'll drop our Leo into coverage and then he kind of like flies around the edge from the 4-eye spot because he played a lot of big end over there in Denver. I was watching him a little bit recently. And the thing with him in Denver is he didn't really get very many run defending snaps.
Mm-hmm.
But he showed enough over there where it's very clear that he was due for an increase in his role on that front. And with how weak Seattle's run defense is right now, he'll certainly get a ton of snaps against the run. And I'm really excited to see that.
Mm-hmm. I love how you described that as the Miles Murphy.
Yeah, well,
That's fantastic.
the difference is Miles Murphy was not schematically told to do that at all. He just wants to fly around the edge.
Yeah,
no matter where.
Yeah. That still might be the best interaction I've had on Twitter. When you were just like, I dare you to find one snap of him winning inside, and it just didn't happen.
The opinion just tanked.
Yeah, because I was like, wow, this guy's fun and athletic. And then you were like, but does he win inside?
No.
And he does
no,
not.
He doesn't.
That is the answer. I had to break some Bengals fans' hearts the other day.
Yeah, it's fake versatility.
It really is.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I can see a world where he maybe like kind of works out if they can get him in the right role, but he's not good.
Yeah. No, where you're gonna if you're gonna make him good, he's not gonna be this like hybrid that he was potentially gonna get drafted. He's gonna be like a pure 4-3 defensive end, I think. Or you really beef him up and play in the interior, but I think the former is just a little bit more likely. But yeah. I don't think he's not this like Trayvon Walker kick in, kick out type of player.
Yeah, he's not the good type of tweener, unfortunately.
No.
But looking at some of Seattle's other major moves, obviously they brought back Bobby Wagner. Surely that's a serious move.
Dude. I'm not against it at this point, but what I do hate is people treating him like he is one of the best off-ball linebackers in the league. Like, his role is going to be so limited in Seattle.
His role is just run forward.
It literally, and locker room guy.
Yeah.
Like, because like, when the move was made, I really didn't consider how literally everyone is rejoicing that he's back in 54. And that is certainly like a valuable move to make at that. I can't hate that. But he's gonna be like a spinner. Like he's gonna get downhill. I bet he's a big part of the blitz. You mentioned Seattle being like dead last in cover 0. A lot of times they were running like zone blitzes. I bet he's gonna be very involved in that. Get him downhill. And get to kind of like power through a guard.
Yeah.
I think he can handle that. And Seattle certainly had a big tackling issue last year, stemming from Quandre Diggs. Man, that kid could not wrap up to save his life. I think Bobby Wagner is going to be he'll be big in that because that certainly has not left him at all.
Yeah.
But not this like all pro caliber guy that a lot of Seahawks Twitter is treating him as right now.
Listen, I love Bobby Wagner. He was one of the pillars growing up, but he's not that guy anymore. However, like you said, he can run forward and blow up a guard. So there's still a role for him in Seattle.
Yeah, getting him downhill in your tight formation. Yeah, that'll be sweet.
Yeah, for sure. And then some of their other moves, they had a Jaron Reed, who you mentioned you're not big on, you're not a big fan of.
No. Another locker room guy. It's very clear Clint Hurt values that a lot on defense, but I think it's the contract right now is technically 2 years, $10 million. If you actually look into it, it's more of a 1 year, $3 million because there's just no way he's not a cap casualty after this year. But it just looks like his lower body has completely left him. He just doesn't really have strength in that area anymore. And I don't see where he's going to be taking productive snaps.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be a Jaron Reed expert, but I agree. I wasn't super impressed with what I've seen out of him. But like you said, locker room guy, former Seahawk. He was, a second-round pick, I think?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's right.
So, you know what? Make the fans happy, I guess. Well,
Yeah.
the casual fans, not the real
Yeah.
ball knowers like
Not the
Jackson
yeah.
Powers.
It's just like I get locker room presence.
Hmm.
Paying him what you cut when or what you saved when you cut out Woods is just that's bad turnover to me.
Al Woods was a good locker room guy, wasn't he?
I mean, he wasn't necessarily like renowned for it, but he certainly was not this locker room cancer. And like
Yeah.
as old as he is, he's like 39 right now or something like that. So I understand why they wanted to move off of him. He was so much more productive against the run last year.
Hmm.
I don't really see what you're gaining here from a actual football standpoint of things.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Hmm.
And then they also brought in Evan Brown from Detroit, who played pretty well in Frank Ragnow's absence last year. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that move, but I think it's
I
pretty
don't know that
solid.
he starts. He's competition with Olu right now.
Right.
I
Okay.
we'll see what kind of role is carved out for him, but
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
it's competition more less than like he's not going to be this guaranteed starter.
Hmm. And you know what? Even if he did start early, I don't think it would last that long. I really like Olu. I think
Yeah,
he's gonna be the starter by the very least second half of the season.
yeah.
So you know, definitely a solid move. It wasn't super expensive. I think it was a pretty solid deal, if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken, money wise. They also added Julian Love, who you said you weren't a big fan of in terms of the value, at the very least.
I love him as a player. I
Hmm.
like what he's adding. I think is really valuable. He can go down and play like against slot guys, which we don't
Hmm.
really need given the depth of our cornerback room. Um, but with Jamal Adams, I think I'll talk about Jamal Adams a little bit later, but I'm sort of fearing the worst for him right now. Him and Quandre up as our like two high safeties, I think makes a lot of sense. He's really good in that regard. It's another like turnover issue that because like Ryan Neal was going to be way cheaper than that, and I understand Ryan Neal's a little bit better in the box, less than like a deep coverage guy,
Hmm.
but I don't know. It's just like I think that they assigned value really poorly this offseason in terms of
Yeah.
like how where you're allocating money. That's kind of the issue I have with him.
Hmm. And then some of the other free agents they brought in, linebacker Devin Bush, because why not?
Yeah,
Does not help the lack of coverage in that room, unfortunately.
man.
Isn't he wearing number 0 for y'all?
He was wearing 11, and then
Ooh,
JSN decided he was wearing 11. I don't know
yeah.
what Bush is wearing right now. I can actually look this up
I was gonna
super
say I thought I
quickly.
saw that he was wearing 0, which is, you know, even though I'm not the biggest
He
advocate for
is.
0, I
He
feel
is
like
wearing
that's such a
0.
waste.
Yeah, I know. Given like I find it so hard to believe that Seattle's going to be like close to dead last in the league in formations with two inside linebackers on the
Hmm.
field. Like it's going to be mostly Bobby and then Brooks when he gets back. Like it'll be a ton of Jordan Brooks. Devin Bush is hardly seeing time and zero's drip to me. I really like the look of the number
I'm starting
0.
to come around to it. I
Yeah.
think it kind of depends on the player. You know, I'm not hip with the
If
kids, so I don't
yeah,
know what aura means yet. But I
dude,
feel like a player has good aura. 0 fits
0 on
them
a
well.
player with some aura. I love the look.
Yeah,
But just Devin Bush, he's robbing.
yeah,
Like because we have so many different playmakers on offense that would look
hmm,
awesome in 0, but
yeah. Imagine
Devin Bush has
Rashad Penny
stolen
wearing 0.
that.
Oh wait, no, he just left. I'm an idiot. I was
Yeah,
gonna say Penny wearing 0 would kind of go hard, even though he's not
Even like
there.
Charbonnet wearing 0, I
Yeah.
would like
Although
that's
I don't
yeah.
know, Charbonnet's kind of an old school back. I feel like he's gonna have a traditional number. Ken
He
Walker,
is.
if he wanted to switch to 0, I think would go hard.
It would. I like the 9. I'm too used to the 9 look for him
Fair,
already,
fair.
unfortunately, because I would have said him, but
Hmm.
like
Even
yeah,
if JSM wanted to wear 0,
even if
I think
JSN wanted to wear it. Yeah,
that
the only
could have
issue
went
I'd have
hard.
with that is he kind of ruin my 11 jersey that I'm rocking
Well,
with them right now.
I'm saying if he
But like I
would
see
have
what you're
done it
saying.
right
Oh, I
away,
would have
yeah.
bought that jersey so much quicker.
Hmm. Yeah, like for the Bears, for example, they don't have anybody wearing 0 yet.
Mm,
And like I'm trying to decide in my mind who I think would look the best with 0. To me, I think it would be like Jaquan Brisker.
that's a good one.
Like that's who it's
Um,
automatically went to for me. I don't know why.
if
He
if Velus Jones really did look like Debo. He would look cool in a 0,
Yeah,
but we're not at that point where I'd be willing
yeah.
to.
Mooney was teasing it. Like
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say if
Mooney would look
Mooney.
good too.
I think Mooney's had too much production at a number 11 uniform, where.
Yeah, I get that.
But I do think Mooney would be a baller at
hmm
0.
But yeah, moving over to the draft, which I feel like is a lot more exciting to talk about. On my big board, the Seahawks drafted two of the top 15 players in the class, being Devon Witherspoon and Jackson Smith-Njigba. The one thing I will say about their draft class as a whole is I'm a little bit surprised they didn't target the interior of their offensive line earlier than they did. I know they ended up with, I think it was Anthony Bradford.
Yep.
Uh, but I'm surprised they didn't try to go for one of the other guys like Osiris Torrance or even one of the earlier centers like John Michael Schmitz.
I think
Um,
yeah.
but I'm not
Talking
going
about
to
Torrance,
complain.
like I think the reason that they're avoiding Torrance is I really don't like the look of Torrance running a lot of zone. And you
Mm-hmm.
talked about like how much Seattle's running outside zone. He's not someone who's climbing very
And
quickly to
that's
the second
understandable.
level. So I can understand why we avoided him. But I do agree, like technically, like if you think about it, we traded back from our third round pick to the fourth round and then grabbed Anthony Bradford with that pick. So I guess like if you look at it in the right light, like that's kind of where we got him. But I do like the Olu in the fifth round. Like I think
Yeah.
that's a solid addressing of the center spot because we haven't had a good center in a really long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like the guard position. I think could have used some more early
Yeah,
peppering.
for sure. But outside of that, this is the question that I've asked everybody once we get to the draft. I feel like it's kind of an obvious answer, so maybe if you don't want to go with the obvious answer, you can pick a different one. But who was your favorite draft pick?
JSN.
Yeah.
JSN. Yeah. I would say, but like thinking of a non-obvious answer, I'd probably say Olu, but that one's close. I've definitely come around to Witherspoon, but
hmm
I just think like I feel really confident that he's going to be giving up more like big plays through the air than anyone in our secondary right now.
Yeah, I do feel like that's something you got to worry about a
Hmm.
little bit with him, just because he's so eager.
Yep.
Like he's such an eager corner, and I mean that pays off sometimes. You know, you've got another not eager but another playmaker opposite him
Hmm.
with Tariq Woolen. So who knows? Maybe you'll find balance with the two of them, or maybe Woolen can kind of knock some sense into him and be like, "Hey, you don't have to jump at literally everything,"
Yeah,
because
we'll
Lord knows
see.
Witherspoon likes to do it. But
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think that like with Witherspoon, one of the other coping mechanisms that has helped me get through it is like I trust Pete Carroll fully with the
hmm
cornerback position, especially in the late rounds, because like that's where Woolen, Sherman, Shaquille Griffin came from. Like all of them are like fifth or sixth round guys. If Pete Carroll believes in a cornerback enough to take him with the fifth overall pick, like there's a lot of star-studded potential there
hmm
because he's just like that's one of his position specialists.
hmm Well, I think one of the big things with Witherspoon
Hmm.
is just how sticky he is. Like, there's a term, and I'm not going to pretend like I made this up. If you know who Marcus Whitman is, also goes by that franchise guy. He's the one who put me on to this terminology when it
Hmm.
comes to evaluating a quarter. It's called route squeeze. And it's essentially like imagine you have a rubber band, and when you pull it apart, it's going to snap back, right?
Yep.
So, route squeeze is how quickly a corner, when there's a little bit of separation, can snap back to the
Yep.
receiver. And
Yeah.
Witherspoon is like, I would almost say like generational when it comes to doing
I
that. Like
think
he
yeah.
snaps back so quickly.
I I think
It's
I think Gonzalez was actually a little bit better in that regard because like
I don't disagree.
he had some weird feet, but his
hmm
hips were butter. Because like I
hmm
remember one play, he was guarding a receiver on the left side of the field, running like a 10-yard in route, and the
hmm
receiver faked to the outside. Gonzalez bit and then didn't lose a single step in separation when the receiver broke in because he flipped his hips so fast and
hmm
is able to like get there in. So like I certainly like Gonzalez more from a
hmm
coverage standpoint, but I can understand why Witherspoon is a little bit better of a fit.
Oh, for sure.
I
Yeah.
think that certainly makes sense to me. And like given that Witherspoon and Gonzalez were like those were the top two guys on pretty much everyone's board.
Mm-hmm.
Like Gonzalez falling all the way to 17. I think it was a little bit of an interview issue, but I can see like I think there's some clear separation in terms of where a lot of teams have the two. Like I bet a lot of teams had Witherspoon over Gonzalez, given like the discrepancies in where they were
Mm-hmm.
drafted. But yeah, I'm certainly coming around to it a little bit more. And the other thing is Pete Carroll like really values having just a lockdown secondary. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you look at our Legion of Boom days, the pass rush was good. But really where that stemmed from was Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, Byron Maxwell. Like that's the position where Pete Carroll gets it done first. And I think that like this secondary right now is at the level to where like you could build a really, really awesome defense around this group.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think as a whole, it was a really interesting cornerback class, especially at the top, because not only do you have the two Goliaths with Gonzalez and Witherspoon, even though you're not as high on Witherspoon as most people
Hmm.
seem to be. But you also had some interesting like wild cards, like Emmanuel Forbes, for example, who ended
Yep.
up going before Gonzalez, and it was very much if he fits in your defense, you probably think he's CB2, maybe even the best corner in the league. If he doesn't, you probably think he sucks. And he was very much he's going to a quarters defense or he's not going to play football correctly, like ever, because of how skinny he is. And then you have the other guys like Joey Porter and Deontay Banks and all this different stuff. But I do think to this day, and I will die thinking this, it's insane that Gonzalez fell to 17. I think the league letting him go to Bill Belichick of all people was a massive mistake. And I've said this before publicly, and I will die on this hill. I think we're about to see Gonzalez have a rookie year that is very close to, if not better than Sauce Gardner's. I don't think it's crazy to say that at all. I think not Witherspoon. I think Gonzalez was a better player in college than Sauce Gardner was. I think he was a better prospect coming out. But that being said, Witherspoon's still really cool. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to sit here and gush about Gonzalez when we're supposed to be talking about Witherspoon.
Yeah.
Witherspoon is going to be a damn good corner. I'm a big fan of
Hmm.
him. Like I said, I think he was like 12th on my big board or something. I really liked
Okay.
him.
Yeah.
So I think Witherspoon's going to be awesome. I think he's a perfect fit for this defense. And then, like you mentioned, Olu is somebody that, you look at this team, they haven't had a real long-term option at center since Max Unger? Like
Yeah.
it's been a long time.
It has.
And I think Olu can really, really be that. I think he absolutely can be. And like you mentioned earlier, it's a very zone heavy system. You need a center that can kind of move around, and the center is going to be one of the more important points on the offensive line, period. And having one that can move and hopefully play consistently like Olu did through college, I think is a big deal. So I can see why that would be a really exciting pick. For me, I think the pick that excites me the most is Derek Hall,
Yeah.
just because seeing him get to work with, I already forgot the guy's name. I think it's BT Jordan.
I think you're
Yeah,
right.
BT Jordan. Getting to see him work alongside someone who has been hyped up to me as one of the best pass rushing specialists in the world is going to be really exciting. I really like Derek Hall. He was somebody that I kind of had to come back around on because you know me, when it comes to a guy that isn't great as a tackler or as
Yep.
a run defender, especially at the edge, I'm going to be turned off a little bit. But the
Uh-huh.
more I watched Hall, the more I was like, okay, it's not actually that bad with the tackling. It's just something that
Hmm.
needs a little bit of work and, polish it up. You're working with Pete Carroll, right? You'll get
Yeah.
it figured out. He will beat tackling into you if he has to.
Hmm.
Um, but you're looking at one of the longer DNs or one of the longer edges in the class. I think he had like 34-inch arms, ran a 4.55, just really, really strong and a really good run defender, sets a really strong edge. I'm excited to see how he's going to fit into their defense because if I were Seattle, I think he would be a day one starter. Um, but you have a nice rotation going. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we kind of wrap up and
Yeah.
talk about the roster as a whole. But
Hmm.
I love Derek Hall. I'm a little bit upset that he went to Seattle and not Chicago. I'm not going to lie, but I do think he's going to be a fantastic fit for y'all. And then looking at some of their other picks, obviously Jackson Smith-Njigba, the two of us cannot praise enough. Just one of the smartest receivers I've ever seen. If
Hmm.
I'm being totally honest, I think he has the upside of being the best slot receiver in football. I don't think it's crazy to say that. And he's somebody that's just going to do a lot of the dirty work for your offense, really willing to run block, which is obviously, again, something I love out of a receiver. Zach Charbonnet, like I said, just kind of like a mini David Montgomery, just strong, smart, consistent, surprisingly good route runner out of the backfield. And then Cam Young, who is just straight up a nose. Like he's
Yep.
he's a fantastic run defender, can't rush the passer for shit. He is one of the worst pass rushing defensive tackles I have ever seen, but man, can he stuff the run. And that is what Seattle needed. Anthony Bradford, I don't know how to feel about him, if I'm being totally honest. Like he kind of feels to me like a poor man's Osiris Torrance, which is weird given the fact
Yeah.
that Osiris Torrance doesn't really fit with what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure how I feel about Bradford. I don't think he's going to start. I think he is
No.
competition, but
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a solid like depth guy that you're hoping can break, because I do think Phil Haynes ends up landing the starting job at right guard.
Okay.
I think Bradford is sort of a depth guy that will be competition in the building for Haynes, certainly, because he's no superstar where he's guaranteed
Right.
the right guard spot. But if Bradford doesn't win the starting job week 1, I think you're okay with that, because there's certainly like some development to be had. And if he can be your starting guard 2 or 3 years down the road, like I think that's a solid spending of a 4th round pick. But I'm really not too sure what to think of his game and how it's going to translate.
Yeah,
I'd say
for sure. When I did my draft grades, this was the lowest graded pick that
yeah.
I gave Seattle. I really, like I said, I don't know what to make of it. I'm kind of coming around to it a little bit more, but I don't know. The big thing for me is even if you're looking for a developmental guard, there were just guys that I liked better. Like Chandler Zavala and Antonio Mafi were both on the board, and I would have taken
Mm-hmm.
both of those before I would have taken Bradford. So it's tough, but hell, they clearly know better than I do. So I'm going to get made out to look like an idiot, probably. Um, and then Mike Morris, who is officially converting to defensive tackle, which is awesome because he
Yep.
is one of the most one-dimensional edge rushers I have ever seen. So you put that at defensive tackle, and it works out a lot better. Just
Mm-hmm.
another really powerful, good run defender. And then the other 2 picks, Jarek Reed, who might make the team, might not. I don't know. He'll be a good special teamer if he does make the team.
Yeah.
And then Kenny McIntosh, who I don't know if you maybe want to talk about. I don't really have super strong thoughts on him, but I know a lot of people like him.
I don't either. I think, like, once again, I've alluded to it a million times. I think he's good for the locker room. Like, he clearly has a lot of fun-loving energy,
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of guys can kind of hang with. I think he will probably end up. I don't think Seattle's going to have a true third down back like we did with Homer last year. But I think he'll probably be the closest thing to that. Good receiver. I think he's explosive. But other than that, yeah, I don't think he carves himself out a huge role in his tenure in
Yeah.
Seattle.
Yeah, he's just one of those guys that feels like a wide receiver in a halfback's body.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not super moved by him. I agree. He'll have a role, but I don't think it's going to be a super big role.
Yeah. And yeah, I think you're fine with that with a 6th
Yeah,
round
for
pick.
sure.
Like, it's
For sure.
it's not that's not a waste by any means, but
No, not by any means.
especially considering, like, we needed a running back in the building. We only had 3 before he was drafted, and one of those guys was drafted 2 days earlier than him,
Mm-hmm.
or 1 day earlier than him, I guess. Yeah, so he'll make the team for sure, but I don't know how much I see him being any kind of Seattle legend.
Right. But where the Seahawks do end up finding Seattle legends quite often is with their undrafted free agents.
Yep.
As we all know, Pete Carroll and God, his name's escaping me again. The general manager, Schneider,
John
right?
Schneider. Yep.
Yeah. They love their UDFAs. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of their UDFAs I'm not super familiar with, but I've heard talked about a lot. Guys like Jake Bobo, CJ Johnson, Matt Landers, Tyjon Lindsey, excuse me.
Mhm.
But the name that really excites me, one of my guys in this draft class, is tight end Noah Gindorf out of North Dakota State University. Obviously, someone who I came onto a little bit watching my favorite player in the whole class, Mr. Hunter Lipke. This guy moves like a moose. which I think is just awesome. He's just a big, like, hunkering tight end that is also kind of smooth, if that makes sense.
Okay.
He's somebody that I think would have been draftable had he not gotten hurt. I think it was a lower body injury early in the season last year. I want to say it was his ankle, but I could be wrong. He missed all of the pre-draft stuff because of it. So that was kind of like why nobody went after him. But as a UDFA, this is a guy that I think will not only be on the final 53, but I think will be competing for pretty solid playing time. Because if nothing else, he's just a strong, big tight end that blocks his ass off.
Yeah.
But he's somebody also that, like, when he gets an open field, he's incredibly hard to tackle because of how he moves and how strong he is. And he's just like a true wide tight end, something that Seattle really hasn't had in a long time. Someone that can really step in and be an impactful, at the very least, blocker. So with the amount of zone that this team runs on offense, the zone running, it's important to have a good blocking tight end, and I think Gindorf can absolutely be that. So I'm excited to see what he does. I think he'll be interesting to watch throughout training camp. And if he doesn't make their final 53, I will be incredibly shocked, and I think he will end up being on somebody's final 53.
Yeah.
He's somebody that really excites me.
I'm not familiar with his game at all. I'm not going to claim to
You
know a
need to
thing
learn.
about him. I will.
Hop on the
I
train
will.
now before
Yeah,
it's too late.
by the time training camp and preseason come around, I'm sure I'll be familiar with him. The only two, like, the UDFAs that I could see making the team, Jake Bobo, you mentioned earlier. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes D Eskridge's spot. I bet he's a I don't think Eskridge makes the final 53. And then I'm blanking on the name. There's this one safety that has apparently been
let's see if I have
some
him written down.
standout.
Christian Young.
It might have been. I don't remember the name at all, but
Okay.
yeah, I heard that I think it was like, is there like a Bubba something on?
Bubba. I don't have it written down. Let's see here. Let's look at their depth chart. A Bubba?
Yeah, like Bubba.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a Bubba, unfortunately.
I don't know. I'm blanking on the name. There's one that had apparently been like a standout that I read about. I wouldn't be surprised if he makes the team. And I think we already cut him, but Joseph Tavai was someone I was really excited for out of San Diego State. That was my premier guy before.
He's listed on ESPN still, so.
Is he? Okay, maybe I'm thinking of someone else that we cut, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. He's kind of like a weird hybrid. He's very Puna-esque, who was also an undrafted free agent. So yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it, but yeah, those are the three guys I've got carved out right now.
Now, second to last thing I want to do here is just kind of run through the roster, talk about anybody that maybe hasn't come up while we've been talking, but I feel like we've covered our bases pretty well. But one thing I do want to ask about the quarterback room, specifically Mr. Geno Smith, do you think he's going to be able to follow up what he did last year with a season that is as good or potentially even better?
Yeah, I actually have no doubt in my mind, really, that he's going to be just as competent this year as he was last year. A lot of people, I think you know exactly what I'm referencing. A lot of people have said, like, Geno is only good because of Pete Carroll.
Yes, the defensive mastermind, Pete Carroll, has carried Geno Smith.
But, like, a lot of what Geno was doing last year, what he was doing at a very high rate, what took high levels of difficulty. He's sort of like a light version of Dak Prescott to me, where his first instinct is going to be to operate within the pocket, and he's going to be aggressive in that manner. But he also has the necessary tools to create outside of that if need be. And given the addition of a bunch of very valuable weapons on the offense, Jackson Smith-Njgiba, Zach Charbonnet, both of those guys are going to be seeing the football in their hands a decent amount this season. I just don't really see the path to where it gets worse, because, like, nothing about what he did on tape looks 1 year wonder-esque. He looked like a veteran in so many different standpoints. I just think I have to believe that is what continues.
I think anyone projecting a Geno fall off is out of their minds, because, like you said, him looking like such a poised veteran last year was a really big step in the right direction for him. And, you know, he's been around the league. I feel like he's just somebody that hasn't really gotten a full chance with an offense that could really allow him to do what it is he's good at. I mean, obviously, early in his career, he had that chance and he blew it, but as he's grown, he's aged like a fine wine, is kind of what I'm
Yep.
trying to say here. And he's still, by quarterback standards, relatively young, right? He's in his early 30s.
32, I want to say.
Yeah. So by quarterback standards, that's really not that old. Modern quarterback standards, at the very least. Now, I'm not saying Geno's your answer for the next decade or anything, but it wouldn't shock me for the next 4 to 5 years if Geno is somebody that at least keeps the Seahawks afloat.
Yep.
And this is a team that is doing wonders when it comes to building around him. So at some point, even if Geno takes a step or two back, he has enough around him to kind of push him back up, right? The Seahawks, worst case, are going to be an example of a team that elevates their quarterback rather than their quarterback elevating them. But I still don't think that's going to be the case within the next 2 or so years. I think Geno's still got quite a bit left in him. So then moving on, we've talked about the running back room. We've talked about the receivers. The tight end room is interesting. Obviously, like I said, I'm a big Noah Gindorf guy. I think he's going to be challenging, at the very least, Will Dissly for that tight end 2 spot. How do you feel about this room?
I feel okay. Fant was someone that I thought had a huge. If Seattle was going to do any major moves, with their draft picks, I thought there was a big chance Fant got moved. He is very good with the ball in his hands, but never really seemed to find a ton of receiving opportunities. And I think that was the case in Denver as well. Dissly, I think he's a good blocker and then offers a serviceable amount down the field. Parkinson right now is our third string, and then I think the Noah Gindorf guy you're talking about and Tyler Mabry are the 2 guys on the outside looking in.
Mm-hmm.
Seattle, especially early in the season, had a ton of tight end involvement in the offense. We'll see how that looks this year. I think it's going to look a little bit more spread and gun
Mm-hmm.
and pistol heavy. But yeah, I'm not totally moved, but it's not a weakness by any
Yeah,
means.
I would say we're probably going to see JSN take on a lot of the responsibilities that like a tight end would have in a modern offense, where it's a lot of the over the middle stuff and getting the tough yardage and things like
Yeah,
that.
like a lot of Kelsey type of.
Yeah, that
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, I didn't want to make the comparison, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what I
Oh,
was alluding
I'm ready,
to.
willing to draw the.
I know you are. I was hoping, I was lobbing it up to you. I was hoping you'd throw it down.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I don't think this tight end room outside of blocking is really going to do a whole lot for you. I'm not saying they're gonna be a non-factor by any means, but I do agree that the receivers are going to kind of take precedent. We're going to see them relying a lot more on them, and even the running backs to catch the ball more often. But moving over to the offensive line, obviously you got to be feeling pretty great about your young tackle duo, both rookies last year. Charles
Yeah.
Cross was the 9th overall pick,
Yep.
and then Abraham Lucas was a mid-round pick. Really
Yeah.
played well last year. So you're feeling great there.
Yeah, definitely. There's both of them played, I think, right around league average last year, which as rookie tackles, if you can step in and do that, that's certainly a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it felt like their development hit a little bit of a wall later in the season. So that's where I have like a little bit of concern.
Interesting. Okay.
But I don't really see the path to a ton of regression,
Mm-hmm.
especially with Abe Lucas, because like a lot of his strengths are like hand fighting and stuff like that, and stuff that like won't really go away. Like I think his tape sort of translates to he'll be serviceable at least for a good amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would like to see both of them take a much bigger leap in year 2, but we'll see how lucky we get on that front.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with how a lot of the rookie tackles performed last year, I think outside of those two and like Ike Ekwonu and
Yeah,
Braxton Jones, it was pretty underwhelming.
yeah. Evan Neal didn't do too much.
Trevor Penning was Trevor Penning.
Oh yeah, and well, yeah, he looked bad and tore
Yeah.
his ACL, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm writing that one off.
Yeah. But the point being, given where the class is at last year, they definitely looked very, very good. And I agree. You're hoping for a bit of a jump this year, but I don't expect them to go backwards by any means.
Yeah.
And then the interior of the offensive line, you mentioned Phil Haynes is probably going to be your starter on one side. They've got Damian Lewis listed as the other starter. To be honest, I'm not super familiar with his game. I
He
don't.
will be the only surefire starter
Okay.
on that part of it. He's not incredible, but there's a lot of times in the running game where he can just blow somebody up.
Okay.
And not a bad hand fighter in the passing game either. But he's the only guy on the interior offensive line that I would say, like, his job is not up for grabs.
Okay. Yeah, and then at center, obviously we've already talked about Evan Brown and Olu are going to kind of go
Mhm.
back and forth here. I wouldn't be shocked if Olu was the starter week one, but like I said, he will definitely be the starter by at least the back half of his rookie year.
I'm predicting him to be the starter week
And that's
one.
valid. That's
That's yeah.
incredibly valid.
Hmm.
Um, and then moving over to the defensive line, we've already talked about Dre'Mont Jones. We've talked about Jerron Reed. Brian Monet, I think is how you say that name, is currently the starter
Yeah.
at nose tackle.
Well, he tore his ACL late in the year last year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he'll be back in time for week one. I
So
think
it'll be Cam
really
Young.
yeah, I think he's going to be seeing early snaps, which I'm a little bit concerned about. The track record for rookie nose tackles is not perfect.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, I don't know. That's I definitely fear for this run defense once again this year.
Yeah, yeah, that's understandable. But at least your linebacker room will be able to pick up some of the slack there, because like we mentioned,
Because
Bobby
they're really
Wagner's
good.
that's all they do is defend the run. I mean, it's kind of like the Seahawks just said, okay, the interior of our defensive line needs help, so let's just make sure all of our linebackers are good at stopping the run, but then none
Yeah.
of them can cover, so let's just make our corners insane.
The worst part about our defense right now is the guys that are injured, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's Jamal Adams, it's Jordan Brooks, and it's Brian Monet. Brian Monet
Mm-hmm.
is like our clear starter at nose tackle right now.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Brooks is the only serious linebacker in the building in terms of like taking on a legitimate Mike role.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamal Adams, like, even though he looks really bad when he is like an overhang safety, is awesome in the box, and as a
Mm-hmm.
pass rusher offers a ton in the blitz. I don't know. I think like because one thing I've thought about is if you had one of Brooks or Adams injured, coverage wise, you could deal with it, because if it was just Brooks injured, you could have Julian Love as your other high safety, and then basically base yourself in big nickel, and have Jamal kind of be like almost like a linebacker,
Mm-hmm.
because he's not a great deep coverage guy, but he can certainly cover that role over the middle of the field. And then the other thing you could do is if it was just Jamal hurt, basically slide Julian Love into where he was. Um, but man, I just think like having both of them down means there's going to be at least one hole, and I'm really not projecting this defense to look great quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I mean, Pete Carroll's had a track record over the past few years, like they don't really find it until week like 5 or 6, and that was
Mm-hmm.
the case this year. Like the Lions and Saints both just stomped on us, particularly the Saints. And then we sort of found it a little bit throughout the rest of the year. I think you can at least hope the secondary plays well, but I am not as optimistic for this defense as a lot of other people are.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, and I get that. The injuries really are tough. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of them, but the guys that are hurt, like you said, it's really hard to manage without them or to, figure things out. But moving over to those linebackers we were talking about, specifically the edge rushers, Daryl Taylor, Derek Hall, excuse me. I don't know why my brain. I tried to say Derek Carr and Derek Hall at the same time. I don't know why that
Yeah.
happened.
It's all right.
But anyways, Daryl Taylor, Derek Hall, Uchenna Nwosu, and Boye Mafe is one hell of a rotation. That's not even including some of the other guys like Tyreek Smith, Alton Robinson, V Jones, and MJ Anderson. I feel like you got to be, even though there's not like a true alpha, so to
Hmm.
speak, in this edge rusher room, I feel like you got to feel pretty good about the rotation.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the only guy that's going to be taking on snaps pretty much everywhere is Uchenna Nwosu.
Mm-hmm.
He's not this like top 10 guy, but he's probably right around the top 15
for
and
sure.
is very serviceable in both the pass and run games. He'll be the guy who he'll lead this group in snaps by a very good amount.
Hmm.
And then I think like obviously other guys are gonna get run. But the other two like main rotational pieces, Derek Hall will be the guy on running downs and
Hmm.
running situations because Daryl Taylor cannot set the edge to save his life.
Yeah.
Like it's pitiful. But Daryl Taylor will be in every single third down, dime package look, like any kind of 2-minute drill, anything really where it's a passing situation. Daryl Taylor will be on the field. He's really crafty in that regard. His like sacks to snap ratio had to be one of the best in the league because he had almost 10 sacks last year and really was not getting any run on early downs. So that's where he's going to be plugged in. You mentioned Boye Mafe. I wouldn't be surprised if he is kind of. I bet his role is like when Nwosu's tired. That's when Mafe gets play.
Hmm.
I was not. You and I were both not in love with that pick when it
Yeah.
happened. And I don't want to write off a second round pick a year ago like that early, but I really am not too confident on him panning out and being like a
Yeah.
major cog in this machine. Um, but yeah, I certainly think like the pass rush is where it's going to happen, and it's going to happen for the interior too, right? Like Dre'Mont Jones obviously is the best interior pass rusher on our team by a mile.
Hmm.
Mario Edwards, if he makes the team, that's what his contribution is going to
For
look
sure.
like. So, yeah, I think overall Seattle's going to be a lot more efficient at getting to the quarterback this year, especially from that inside. But yeah, I feel good about the edge group as a whole.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, neither of us really are big on Boye Mafe, but if he's your fourth edge rusher, then
Yeah,
you're feeling
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
good
You're
about the
cool with it.
room.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So edge is great. Interior defensive line, kind of hit or miss. Linebackers, depending on what the situation is, either really solid or, oh my God, get these fuckers off the field.
Yeah,
There is no in between.
yeah.
Um, which, no disrespect to, prime Bobby Wagner.
No, not at
Dude's one of the
all.
best, but he's just not that anymore,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
I will not entertain anybody trying to put him in a top 10 conversation. I see it all the time. I saw somebody the other day. I can't remember what the context was, but they tried to say he was better than Tremaine Edmonds.
Yeah.
Wild,
Yeah.
just wild.
Uh-huh. Like the you know how ESPN does the thing where they pull all the like executives
Yeah.
and yeah, stuff like that in the league, and Bobby Wagner made his way into the honorable mentions. And the thing that I've noticed about those lists is like the top like 5 or 6 usually look really solid, and then it's the
Hmm.
guy sneaking into the top 10. You're like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Where like that's what Bobby Wagner was to me, where I'm just like, dude, like watch his tape. Like the only reason he got the all pro nod was his PFF grade. Like literally,
Hmm.
like there's nothing else to his name. And one thing I've noticed about PFF, like the way that they determine their grades is they
Force
basically
interns to watch games
well,
like
yeah,
once
that's
over
that's
and
like
then
yeah,
don't actually put
these
any
people
thought
just like
into
don't
it.
know ball. But
Right.
like their system that they grade is based on how well is a guy filling his role. What they don't
Hmm.
take into account is how difficult that role is. And so like Bobby Wagner being a guy coming downhill, rushing the passer, coverage wise, all he's really doing is staring at the quarterback's eyes and like taking a running back in the flat.
Hmm.
Um, and being like sort of a run swallowing guy, like of course he'll have a 90 plus grade because
Yeah.
that's what he's been able to do his whole career. And at
Yeah,
this age and
he's
stage, like that's not really leaving him. But he is an absolute liability to throw out at like if you're
hmm
playing Tampa 2 with Bobby Wagner,
you're done.
like yeah, just like air it over the middle, like he's not catching up.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like that's to me where like I think that the a lot of the people who are really high on him are really flawed in that regard because once you actually turn on his film, like he's very limited as a player.
Yeah, for sure. And I hate to do this again because I've brought up the Bears a billion times in this
Hmm.
video, but for another reference for the PFF thing, um, Justin Jones, who's our starting three tech, I'm not going to act like he's a superstar. He's a solid
Hmm.
rotational guy.
Hmm.
I'm sure you saw the comments he made about Packers fans saying they don't know shit about football. They don't know what they're talking about half the
Oh,
time.
I saw. I didn't know that was him, but I
Yeah.
did see those comments
Uh,
that he made. Yeah.
every response to that from a Packers fan was his PFF grade, which was like a 20, I think.
Oh,
It
jeez.
was a bit. But if you go
Yeah.
back and look, the guy is a 3 tech. He is a light, quick defensive tackle.
Hmm.
And for half of the season last year, he was playing nose tackle because of injuries and just not having the guys to do it.
Yeah.
So you have like a 295, I think, pound defensive tackle playing
Jeez.
nose to two gap. Like, yeah, no shit. He's not going to do well. But when he was rushing the passer, he was our best pass rusher. That's not saying much because I think he had 3 sacks, but he was at
Uh-huh.
least average, is my point. And
Yeah.
they were out here acting like he was the worst starter in football. And it's the point is with PFF grades and with most statistics, I know you know me, I'm not a big stat guy. Me and you are both
Yeah.
tape.
Yeah.
That's
Neither
what
am
we
I.
value.
That's
And
my
I
that's
know,
my Twitter bio right now.
yeah.
Is put down your calculator and roll the tape.
And I know I've brought up like percentages and EP per play and stuff like that. Those are stats that work because they take things into context
Hmm.
and they take things into account. Whereas if you're looking at something like passer rating or just how many yards a
Yep.
quarterback had, there's
Hmm.
no context to that. You could have a quarterback go 0-16 but put up 4,000 yards because he's playing against a light defense every game because they're
Uh-huh.
getting the fucking brakes blown off of them, and people are going to look at that like a good year.
Yep.
Or you could have a quarterback like someone that played for the Tennessee Titans have the best quarterback rating in football like 3 years in a row, even though his role is hand the ball to the hulking behemoth behind me or throw it into the flat as soon as I get the ball in my hand.
Hmm.
Like it blows my mind how little context numbers have with football. And PFF is the epitome of that. There is no context whatsoever. And I think Bobby Wagner, like you said, is a prime example of that because dude is respectfully running baby's first linebacker.
Yep.
And that's not elite linebacker play. Like 95% of linebackers currently rostered can do that.
Hmm.
Maybe not to the same effectiveness. To Bobby Wagner's credit, he's probably a little bit better against the run than a
Yeah.
lot of linebackers out there. But in terms of, like you said, just rating the quarterback, running out into the flat, if you're a linebacker starting on an NFL team, you can probably do that.
Hmm.
And it's ridiculous to me. Like there's actual good linebackers out there. I know they don't get a lot of credit anymore. They're almost like the fullback of the defense at this point because of all the different like uh lighter boxes the teams are running and all
Yeah.
of the big nickel and whatnot in the league. It's almost like a lost art. But there's still a lot of damn good linebackers out there. And it
Yeah.
pisses me off to see Bobby Wagner get that kind of credit at this point in his career.
Hmm.
And again, I mean, no disrespect to the guy. He's one of my favorite Seahawks ever.
Yep.
But no,
It's just
it's
like he
not
should not get
warranted.
that kind of recognition with like
He is a
this
husk
age and
of
stage. Like
himself.
it's yeah.
I mean, it is literally the husk of Bobby Wagner out there,
Hmm.
with all due respect. But anyways, with that ran out of the way, we've talked about the corners, the safeties though. Like you mentioned, Quandre Diggs is somebody that I know Seahawks fans used to be pretty big on. I don't know where he's at now. I know you were mentioning that he can't rap to save his life, which
He
gross.
yeah. He's like a very he kind of has a lot of Seahawks Twitter torn in terms of like where he should be looked at because like he's been a cornerstone at that position for a really long time now. Um I my biggest issue with him is like he's a little bit of a ball chaser, right? Like
Hmm.
I was watching some Derek Carr tape and I was watching him against Seattle and one of the touchdowns Derek Carr got was I don't remember who it was. I don't think it was Jacobs, but they had a running back like going out to the flat. Quandre's up high, bites on it, and then the running back turns it into a wheel route, and it's a wide open touchdown because Quandre just blew his assignment. Like the only
Yeah.
guy really there is the guy in the flat. I don't remember who it was. And then later that game, they scored a touchdown to send it to overtime. Foster Moreau, it was cover two. Foster Moreau is running a corner route from the right side. He was lined up at the Y and like goes into Jordan Brooks's zone. And Jordan Brooks is covering the middle of the field and then like breaks to the corner. Quandre Diggs completely ignores him because he's just keeping his eyes on Carr the entire time. Like he's just not watching the routes that come through his zone. And like the expectation for Brooks to catch up 5 yards on Foster Moreau, it's just like Quandre's putting too much stress on him. Like, I don't know. There's just so many times in coverage where I'm like, you have like made it a lot harder on your surrounding teammates to cover and like keep up with their guys. But he also brings in a lot of interceptions. Like that's gonna come with it. He can't really tackle, so I'm a lot lower on him than I think the rest of the league, and especially the rest of Seahawks fans. But there are certainly some valuables that he brings to the team that like always a ball hawk, um, like consistently towards the top of the league for safeties and interceptions. Big
Hmm.
locker room guy. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I think he is overrated
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah. I mean this respectfully, but to me, Diggs kind of comes off as almost a poor man's Eddie Jackson.
Hmm.
And if you know me, you know that is probably a pretty big insult.
Yeah,
Like it's I respect Diggs. I think he serves a purpose, just like Eddie Jackson does, right? Like you mentioned, they're both really good in coverage.
yeah,
And that is what they're there to do. They're free safeties. That's kind of what they're supposed to do. But when you have a guy that can't tackle on your defense, even if it's in the back end, it's tough. Because, I mean, in the name, safety, they're a safety blanket. If somebody gets to the third level, they need to be able to bring them down.
hmm,
And Quandre Diggs, to his credit, isn't as bad as Eddie Jackson because he's at least trying out there.
yeah,
He just can't do it. Eddie Jackson is a walking business decision
yeah.
where he'll just pass off
That's
tackles to
funny.
somebody else,
Yeah,
and it doesn't work.
yeah.
So
The thing
I
with
understand the
Quandre,
frustration.
yeah, when Quandre's tackling, it's like it's almost like when you play Madden and just spam dive where like
Hmm.
he's not staying on his feet and wrapping someone up. It's just this like Superman lunge off of his shoulder. And it's like it's this initial blunt force, but he's not the heavy. He's like 5'9". He's
Yeah.
not the most overpowering guy in the league. Like most running backs have the contact balance to just kind of bounce
Hmm.
off of that. I don't know. It's just it's really bad
And
attempts
to
to me.
me, that's like that takes less effort than just putting your shoulder into somebody and wrapping up.
Yeah.
Like I
I
know
don't
that
really know what the game
looks
plan is.
tougher, right? But I know that like looks cooler or looks like he's putting his all into it.
Uh-huh.
To me, from a relative to the rest of the league, because obviously I am not an NFL football player. I'm not out there trying to tackle running backs.
Hmm.
To me, that seems not only less effective, but almost softer because you're putting less blow on yourself because you're just kind of throwing your whole body
It's
into
just like
somebody.
yeah, it's just like this like rock that you're throwing at someone
Yeah,
where
yeah. It almost looks like he belongs to the WWE and not the NFL when you're
yeah,
doing shit like that. And
exactly.
there's a
Yep.
lot of DBs that do that. And then, like you mentioned, running backs just kind of shrug it off. You try to do that to Derrick Henry, it's like a fly hitting a brick wall.
Hmm.
Or even if you try to do that to somebody like David Montgomery or Zach Charbonnet that has really good contact balance, you're just going to bounce off of them. They're going to keep going.
Yep.
It's not a hard type of tackle to defend. So it's like, and it exerts more effort to do that than to just, like I said, put your shoulder down and wrap somebody like you're taught to do from the age of like 6 when you play football. So I don't know if some of these safeties and DBs are starting to get into their head, like the Deion Sanders mentality, kind of, where it's like I
Hmm.
don't have to do that. I'm a ball hawk. I'm a lockdown DB. I don't need to
Yeah.
tackle people.
Hmm.
Like much respect to Prime Time. I hate that. He started a shitty trend with that of this trying to like protect your brand and protect your image by not tackling and not putting forth effort in the run game. I hate it. It is a
Yeah.
plague upon NFL defenses, and Seattle fans and Bears fans both know very, very well what that looks like and how fucking frustrating it can be.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But it's incredibly ironic because the guy opposite of him is literally the complete opposite.
Yeah.
He is the inverse of him. But me and you were talking about him a few months ago, and you said that what was it? He had to relearn how to walk or something to that
I
effect.
so I am as big of a pessimist as it is with Jamal Adams' health.
Hmm.
I think his career in football might be over.
Okay.
I would go that far. So he tore his quadriceps tendon week 1 last year against the Broncos. And like if you compare so him and Jordan Brooks tore his ACL in like week 17 or something like that. if you compare the stages that they're at, it is night and day. Where Jordan Brooks is doing these like agility drills, and Jamal Adams just did like a couple months ago him like walking on a treadmill where you can clearly tell one leg is hobbled.
Hmm.
At a minimum, I think he misses most of this year. When he gets back to full health, I think his side to side range is going to be so hindered. Like I'm fearing the worst right now with Jamal Adams. And that's why I was kind of saying if we take a safety early in this year draft, like I wanted Skinner because I
Hmm.
thought Skinner could go in like and defend the run the same way Jamal could. I thought if we go out there, take a guy like him early, it will be all but confirmation for me because that's exactly what happened with Kenneth Walker. Like
Hmm.
we had Penny and Carson. No one expected Seattle to add another running back into that room, but like the first my initial thoughts were, okay, Chris Carson's like neck and back injury is a lot worse than we think it is because how it was last season, like he got hurt and he was like kind of week to week for a little bit. And then Seattle announced him to be out for the season, where it was like, this is something that you could miss for 3 weeks. And it just looked progressively worse. And then that one picture leaked of like the taping thing
Yeah.
on his vertebrae, where it's like, oh, he's done. I am kind of fearing that for Jamal Adams right now, and I really hope I'm wrong. Um, but I think we've seen the last of his NFL days.
Yeah. It's tough.
Hmm.
But I mean, if it's really that bad off with him walking,
Yep.
then like you said, I can't imagine him trying to go full speed on an NFL football field, especially the way he plays, that is so reliant on just flying up and hitting somebody as hard as he can.
Uh huh.
Like
And like,
it's
yeah,
tough.
so my dad is a doctor, and like he
Hmm.
doesn't really specialize in that field necessarily. But when they announced the injury, I was like, Dad, do you think he'll be out for the rest of the year? And my dad was like, he might never play again because that is
Yeah.
just like your lateral movement. If Jamal Adams does play again, he will be such like a hobbit version of himself where we're not seeing the same sideline to sideline rage out of him. And man, especially like with this linebacker core right now, we could use that so bad. Like that is just it's such a blow for this defense, and I really hope that I'm wrong. But man, like I'm fearing the worst.
Well, if he does come back, what kind of role do you think he would be playing in? Because I can't imagine he's playing any safety if he can't move sideline to sideline.
I bet it's similar to what Bobby Wagner is doing right now,
Hmm.
and that like it's just not what we need. And under
Yeah.
the contract that he's in, it's gonna look like really really bad value. Um, but I don't know. I'm really really concerned for what he is going to kind of become.
Yeah. That's tough.
It is.
That's
It
really
is.
tough. And
It's a
I
huge blow to our defense.
yeah, and I feel so bad for Jamal Adams because I feel like he wasn't appreciated, when he
Yep.
was in his prime. Because towards the end there, it was
Like
Blitz
Blitz
Boy
Boy.
and
Yep.
all that shit. What was it he said to quote that one kid? It was like, "I'm the greatest of all time," or "I'm the greatest in the nation," or something, and people were giving him a
Yeah,
bunch
I'm
of
the
shit.
yeah. It was his like so on like the primetime games where they do the
The player
introductions.
intros, yeah.
Yep. It was like Jamal Adams, I'm the best in the nation.
Yeah, and he was
And
quoting some kid that had gotten sick, I think, right?
yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. But yeah, it was like some reference to a video.
Hmm.
Um
But
yeah, but
he was just kind of a punching bag there at the end is kind of my point with that to
yeah.
everybody. Not just
Yeah.
outside of the league, but I know Seahawks fans too were giving him a lot of shit because he couldn't catch, and even then he couldn't catch
Yeah,
because his hand was messed up, right? Didn't he have like a weird finger
there
injury?
was a lot of that. There was also plenty of times where like a football just bounced off of his helmet. Like he actually
Yeah.
had that happen to him week 1 before he ended up getting injured.
Hmm.
Um but man, I really do think that we're in the dark ages of Jamal Adams' career. Like I think it's going all downhill for here. And like it is a shame because like he really has been a very underappreciated player,
For
especially in
sure.
Seattle. Like his first year he came in, led our team in sacks. And he played such a versatile role, and there were a lot of times where like his highlights were high and his lowlights were really low, and
Hmm.
unfortunately, a lot of people would only pick apart the negatives on that front. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I feel it hurts on the inside when
I'm
I think
sure it
about that.
does.
But
Yeah.
but man, like I really, from like a logistical standpoint, I really don't think we're gonna see much more of him.
Yeah. And I mean, at this point, it's very much like Chris Carson, where you brought up where,
Hmm.
for his own sake, I don't even know if it's worth it for him to return to football at this point.
Yeah.
Because it's not like he's somebody that's fighting for a new contract. He's made his money. He's proven himself to be who he was going to be. He has nothing left to prove. It's
Yeah.
just if he comes back, it's for the love of the game. And as much as I respect that, at a certain point, you got to put your health first.
Yep.
And not only that, but if he does come back, I don't think he's going to have as much love for the game as he did. Because, like you mentioned, he's going to be very, very hobbled.
Yeah.
So it's just an incredibly unfortunate situation, but I wish nothing but the best for him.
Yeah. Me as
And
well.
hell, I'd love to be proven wrong. I'd love to see him
Mhm.
defy medical logic and come back and be an all pro somehow. Don't
Yep.
think it's going to happen, but that'd be
No.
wonderful. But that being said, to close out talking about the roster, we got to talk about the special teams, obviously.
Hmm.
Jason Myers just got re-upped. You got Michael Big Dick Dixon, one of the best punters in the league. You got DJ Dallas, excuse me, returning kicks, and then Chris Stoll is your long snapper, which I forgot to mention. You guys actually let two long snappers walk. Is there a
Yeah.
story to that?
So last season, our guy, like ever since the Legion of Boom days, has been Tyler Ott.
Mm-hmm. He's one
He
of the ones
he's
that left
been a
this year.
Seahawk for
Yeah.
really long. Ended up getting hurt. I don't remember what it was, but he's like
Okay.
out for the rest of the season. So we ended up grabbing Carson Tinker off of the Jaguars practice squad, and
Okay.
I think his contract ended up being up, and Stoll I think was just a cheaper option. So let those guys walk.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A little long snapper drama in Seattle.
Oh
Bit of a
yeah.
carousel. Ironically, not the first team that we've talked about having a long snapper carousel going on, considering what just happened in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that kind of concludes talking about the roster. So I've got one last question for you. It's kind of a two-parter.
All right.
What are your expectations for this season? Talking record-wise and just if
Mhm.
there's anything specific. And what player are you most excited to watch this year?
Okay, expectations for the season. I did the like playoff picker thing where you go
Mm-hmm.
through and pick out the whole season. I think I had Seattle finishing at around 11-6.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you can get double digit wins this season, be a playoff team, I think you consider that a win. Offensively, I think in terms of efficiency metrics, I would not be surprised if we're hovering right around top 5 in the league, which, like given how many great quarterbacks out there are, it seems like a pretty steep belief. But I think that this offense it was just short of that last year. And with how much more we're unlocking this year, I really don't think that that's too insane of expectations. Especially if you can get the running game a little bit more efficient with Charbonnet. I think like the EPA in that regard should soar. Defensively, if you can at least tread water on run defense, like if you can be hovering around league average, I'm cool with that. And then I think the secondary should be nails.
Mm-hmm.
I'm expecting. I think Woolen is going to take a jump and be in the conversation for the best cornerback in all of football
I
because
don't
I think he
disagree with
was.
that at all.
There was like he was pretty close. I think he's probably right around that back end of the top 5, maybe just outside of that. But last year, like coming out of UTSA, his tape looked absolutely horrible as a cornerback. But like where he thrived, he had incredible athleticism, like one of
Mm-hmm.
the best physical profiles we've ever seen out of someone coming out of the draft, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
4.2 speed, 6'4" with really long arms. Like it really doesn't get much better than that in terms of their physical build. Like that's lab made.
Mm-hmm.
But as horrible as his tape was, like when we did this last year, I kind of said, I don't think he's going to be a major contributor for at least a year, maybe two. And he came out and was like second in rookie of the year voting. And I just did not see that coming at all. He's progressing way quicker than his timeline would have
Mm-hmm.
suggested. And technically speaking, he wasn't incredible. There were a lot of times where he just had like missteps and stuff like that. Um, And there were a lot of different concepts that he wasn't super sharp with. Like Kyle Shanahan kind of had his way with him in the wild card game.
Yeah.
But he was able to bounce back off that because he's just so physically dominant. I
Hmm.
think you give him another Pete Carroll offseason where he's refining his technique and everything like that. He's certainly not losing anything in terms of speed or anything in that regard. He'll come out and he will be an absolute baller because he just has a ceiling that's like one step higher than anyone else that's doing it right now. And if you can just kind of sharpen things up from a technical standpoint, he will be absolutely awesome. Witherspoon, I think, could come out and look like a rookie of the year candidate. Just like given the role, he's going to make a ton of highlight plays. I think there will be a lot of times where he's just shutting down guys on the inside. He'll get some picks for sure. He'll blow up some guys in the backfield. And I think some like highlight stuff out of him is bound to occur. If he can look sharp and like not give anything up behind him, then I would consider that an absolute win. But I think record rise like right around 10 to 12 wins is where I think this team should fall.
That's valid.
Oh, and the second part of that question,
Hmm.
guy I'm most excited to watch, Jackson Smith-Njigba. I
Yeah.
think I really do think he is going to outproduce Lockett and Metcalf just because there's so much of the field where it's like Seattle doesn't really have the personnel to get there except for him. Like I think he is going to be kind of the security blanket for Geno Smith. Maybe he's not creating as much big plays as Lockett and Metcalf, but I do think that like production wise, he is going to be an absolute star. And I would not be surprised if Seattle's in a situation where they were last year with Walker and Woolen, where it's like you have two very strong candidates for both offensive and defensive rookie of the year. And I think he's going to be that guy on offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% with everything you just said. I think you hit the nail on the head across the board there. Record wise, I do think this is a double digit win team. I would say about 11 or 12 wins. And like I alluded to earlier, this is a team that could absolutely win their division. Kind of dependent on what happens with the Niners quarterback situation. It's no secret that I think Brock Purdy sucks. Sam Darnold, as of right now, is probably their best option, but you've also got Trey Lance in there, although they seem to not give a shit about Trey Lance. I don't know what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
The Rams are kind of irrelevant at this point. The Cardinals are probably going to be picking first overall next year, if not in the top three.
Yep.
So the division's wide open, and
Yeah.
Seattle absolutely looks to be the team that's trending up the most right now, which pains me to say as much as I love the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
Although I guess it doesn't pay me to say. I don't have anything against the Seahawks. I just really like the Niners because of Kyle Shanahan.
Yep.
But in terms of who I'm most excited to watch, unfortunately, with this team, I can't just default to saying the fullback because they do not let Nick Bellore do what he was born to do. So I'm probably going to go with Devon Witherspoon. Like I said, I love Witherspoon. I had a ton of fun watching him at Illinois. I'm not an Illinois fan, but obviously being a Bears fan, I've got kind of like a soft spot for them. And their secondary outside of a certain twin was just electric last year. It was so fun to watch. Him and Quan Martin were two of my favorite players in the entire class. So I'd have to go with Witherspoon or Zach Charbonnet because I'm just a sucker for an old school one cut back that relies heavily on their vision. Obviously, David Montgomery was one of my favorite players for quite a while. So,
Mm-hmm.
but that being said, I think it's pretty safe to say Seattle is trending in the right direction and then some. This is a team that's going to be very, very exciting to watch going forward. And as long as Geno Smith doesn't fall off, which neither of us think is going to happen, they can be scary. With how the NFC is shaping out, they could make a run at the Super Bowl. If we're being 100% honest, crazier shit has happened. Maybe not this year, but maybe you got a little, not quite Legion of Boom, because I don't think you got a bunch of heavy hitters back there, but a dominant secondary could absolutely take you back to the big dance and kind of see what happens from there.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
with that out of the way, that's going to do it for this video. Before we head out of here, Jackson, if you'd like to plug anything, by all means, anything you say will be in the description down below. So if you want to check it out, make sure to do that.
Awesome. Yeah. So Twitter and TikTok, it'll be at jpownfl. That's JPOWNFL. And then YouTube will just be Jackson Powers, which is, you could see it in the display right here. And that's all I got.
Okay. And I'll probably make sure to include specifically your Draft Crushes video, since JSN is a big part of that.
Yeah.
Seahawks fans can go check that out.
Hmm.
And then for me, obviously, everything's in the description. Check out my podcast, Run the North, which we got to get you on at some point.
Yeah.
We got to have you on there at some point. We're kind of in a weird spot right now, figuring out what the hell to talk about, because
Yeah.
we're
Fair
not
enough.
quite into the season being anything yet.
Uh-huh.
And then all my other stuff, Miller Football _ again, links to everything will be in the description down below. And if you've made it this far in the video, thank you. I appreciate it thoroughly. And drop down in the comments who your favorite player on the Seahawks is. Whoever it may be, let us know. And to everyone out there watching, as well as Jackson here joining me, I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it, because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it.